Hello class, today we're going to be looking at the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange was a global exchange of new plants, animals, people, technology, and ideals between the Eastern and Western Hemisphere, which we're looking at the Old World, which is the Europeans, and the New World, which is the Americas. In North America, there were frequent wars between the Europeans and Native Americans, because remember, the Europeans went into the Americas and conquered their land and enslaved the Native Americans. However, the Native Americans did try to fight back, but the downside to the Europeans coming into the New World was they brought many deadly diseases such as smallpox. The diseases is going to kill about 90% of Native Americans, which is going to hurt their population, and it's going to basically prevent them really from fighting back. The European settlers are going to learn to grow corn, beans, squash, and tomatoes, hunt and trap animals from the Native Americans. Looking at the European, or in Europe, new foods from the Americas increase the population because now there's more food, meaning that the people are willing to grow their families because now they know that they have food to supply their families. There was a change in language. You are now introducing different languages from the Americas into like European languages, so slang words are starting to basically come into existence during this time period. It's much higher prices on products because of the trading, and inflation of money is going to come into place. Basically, money is not going to mean a lot. That's what inflation means, is the money becomes inflated, so it's not worth a lot. So prices continuously are going up, but the money does not mean anything as far as the prices is continues going up. So inflation is bad. It's a bad thing. Looking at the Columbian Exchange, back to North America, the Native Americans, their trade routes are going to become the settlers' roads. So they're going to get rid of their trade routes, totally disregard the fact that Native Americans had already had trade routes set up, and are going to develop their own roads. It was new from Europe was wheat, grapes, bananas, sugar, cattle, pigs, goats, chicken, horses, and donkeys all came from North America and is going to be introduced, all came from Europe, is going to be introduced into the North America culture. In Europe, you're going to have a high demand for new goods because of the products in North America. And you're going to have an increased flow of silver and gold. The Columbian Exchange was the beginning of modern capitalism, which is what our society is based on now. It's called profit motive. Like most of us are motivated by making money. So basically it's the investment of money to make a profit. Example, why do people go to school? Why do people continue their education? Why do people go to college? Because they hope to achieve a better job than if they didn't go to college at all, because they feel like they'll get more money if they have more degrees. So why does a person keep getting more degrees? To earn more money. So what motivates them to do that? Money. That's capitalism. Mercantilism was also, we already talked about mercantilism. Basically, it's a new economic policy that focused on exporting more than importing. Meaning the European parent countries wanted to send more of their products out to their colonies than take from their colonies. So they wanted to make sure that they were selling all of their products, like England, they wanted to make sure that they were selling all of their products to like the 13 colonies. And that meant that the parent country was doing very well, and that the colonies were not making as much money as they could because they're taking in all the English products. Same thing for the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Dutch. They did the same thing to their colonies. They practiced mercantilism. The colonies existed for the benefit of the parent country. They provided resources to the parent country, such as tobacco. The Europeans didn't know anything about tobacco until they met the Native Americans, and the Native Americans introduced them to that crop, and it became a popular crop in Europe. So that's like an example of them using a colony just for their resources, which the resource would be tobacco. They have strict laws regulated colonial trade. colonies could only trade with the parent country. Besides the trading of products, you also going to have the trading of people, and that is what's going to lead us to the triangular slave trade route. It was a three-legged trade network. So basically the ships are going to begin in Europe. They are going to have goods and take those goods to Africa, and particularly it's going to be the western coast of Africa, West Africa, and they're going to basically sell those goods for slaves. The Europeans are never going to go inside of Africa, because just like the Native Americans were exposed to smallpox and died, there are a lot of illnesses in Africa that the Europeans could also die from too, like malaria. So they never went inside Africa. They would use a middle person or a middleman to go inside Africa and get the slaves. And most of the slaves would be like prisoner of war from like two African ethnic groups getting into an argument leading into a war, and they would capture the other African ethnic group people, and then they would sell them off as slaves. So slaves were then transported to the West Indies, which is like Haiti, Puerto Rico, Cuba, that area that we basically had a label on our map last week, for textiles, rum, tobacco, and weapons. So you go from Europe to Africa, then they cross this long voyage. Right here it's called the Middle Passage. Hundreds of slaves were transported. Half of them died during this voyage from disease and mistreatment. They were on this ship. Let's say the ship really only supposed to fit 200 people. They would probably put double that. They would put 400 people below deck, and they would lay flat the whole entire time. They would use the restroom where they were sleeping at. They would eat where they were sleeping at, which is going to cause disease and sickness. And the Middle Passage, depending on the weather, could take up to 3 to 4 months. So just imagine what it was like for the slaves on these ships. But the journey from Africa to the New World is going to be called the Middle Passage. So once they make it to the West Indies, that's when they'll start selling them to either North America or South America in exchange for the cash crops that were sent back to Europe, such as tobacco, cotton, rice, that they could not grow in Europe, but they were able to grow in the colonies. So it's going to be a three-legged trade network. So what was the effects of the triangular slave trade? Let's look at how many slaves were taken. In the 1500s, 2,000 African slaves were taken every year. Keep in mind, Christopher Columbus just founded the New World in the late 1400s. By 1780, this is going to be the height of the slave trade, 80,000 African slaves were taken every year and shipped to the New World. By the mid-1800s, when the slave trade stopped, not slavery, but the transportation of slaves across the ocean, the Middle Passage, all that was illegal during this time, by the ending of the slave trade, 11 million enslaved Africans lived in the New World. Because of this, because they took so many slaves out of West Africa, you are going to see a decline of many West African kingdoms, because the main individuals they took were the males. And the males basically helped support their society, and the Europeans are coming in and are taking and removing mainly the males, leaving the women and children, so the kingdoms are going to start declining. And this summarizes the Columbian exchange and the triangular slave trade, which is a result of the exploration that is taking place in the New World. Thank you.